Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely massive. Zero tariffs, full harvest, the new era of Africa-China agribusiness. We are unpacking a truly monumental shift in international trade, and really, the global food system as a whole. On June 12, 2025, a landmark policy announcement essentially rewrote the rules of engagement between the world's second-largest economy and the African continent. So, using the data we've gathered, we're going to break down exactly what this means, the incredible opportunities it opens up, and of course, the very real roadblocks that still need clearing. To really wrap our heads around the gravity of this policy, we have to start with this absolutely staggering number, $150 billion. I mean, that is the sheer size of China's annual food import bill. With a rapidly growing middle class demanding more diverse, high-quality food, China is aggressively working to build more resilient food security networks and diversify away from its traditional suppliers. And virtually overnight, 53 African nations suddenly gained unprecedented, completely tariff-free access to this giant consumer market. But this brings us to a really critical question that we need to keep in the back of our minds throughout this explainer. Can a zero-tariff policy single-handedly transform a continent's agricultural future? Is just swinging the door open to a $150 billion market the ultimate silver bullet for the deep-rooted constraints that have held African smallholder farmers back for decades? Let's dig in and find out. To answer that, we're going to systematically unpack 6 key areas. 1. The zero-tariff breakthrough. 2. Constraints in African agriculture. 3. Imbalances and resource concerns. 4. Unleashing new mutual benefits. 5. Strategic solutions for value. And finally, 6. A sustainable future outlook. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the zero-tariff breakthrough and the June 2025 policy announcement. Okay, so this policy is way more than just a minor trade tweak. It's a massive strategic realignment that completely wipes out previous financial barriers. To really put this into perspective, let's look at the immediate cost advantages. In the past, African exporters were stuck navigating these complex tariff structures that could range anywhere from 5 to 25%. Take a Kenyan avocado exporter, for example. They used to face a 10% tariff, which made it incredibly tough to compete against established heavyweights from places like Mexico or Southeast Asia. But by eliminating those artificial price premiums all the way down to 0%, African agribusinesses instantly gain unmatched cost advantages. Now they can compete head-to-head on pure quality and logistics. It's a total game changer. Let's move on to Section 2, Constraints in African Agriculture, specifically looking at the productivity gap. Now, while the market door is wide open, there is a stark reality on the ground that we simply cannot ignore. Right now, average cereal yields in East Asia and China sit at around 4.5 tons per hectare. Sub-Saharan Africa, on the other hand, has unfortunately remained stagnant at roughly 1 ton per hectare for decades. This massive gap in agricultural output and technology is fundamentally the main hurdle preventing many African nations from moving past subsistence farming and into highly lucrative export-driven agribusiness. When we dig directly into the numbers, the exact reasons for this yield gap becomes super clear. Fertilizer use in Sub-Saharan Africa sits at just 13 kilograms per hectare, which is a tiny fraction of the 190 kilograms used in East Asia. On top of that, only 3.7% of arable land in Sub-Saharan Africa has some form of irrigation. Compare that to a massive 55% in China. Without proper soil nutrient management and modern water harvesting technologies, smallholders literally just cannot scale up to meet international export demands. And the constraints go well beyond just water and fertilizer. In places like Ethiopia, nearly 5 million hectares of arable land suffer from high soil acidity. We're also seeing remarkably low mechanization across the board. But perhaps the most critical bottleneck right now is a severe lack of investment in agro-processing and storage. It's actually quite interesting. While China traditionally funds a ton of farm development and rural infrastructure across Africa, the data shows they've historically underinvested in these crucial post-harvest facilities. And look, without cold storage and processing, crops just rot before they ever reach that new zero-tariff market. Up next is Section 3, Imbalances and Resource Concerns, where we look at different perspectives on the partnership. When examining the overarching trade structure detailed in the academic research, we see a traditional, somewhat extractive pattern. Historically, Africa has exported primarily unprocessed raw materials to China, things like cotton, timber, oil crops, and tobacco. In return, Africa imports finished industrial goods, heavy machinery, and building materials. Critics point out that this model doesn't fundamentally disrupt the international economic order, mainly because it keeps African nations positioned as suppliers of raw materials rather than developers of high-value manufactured goods. We also need to objectively present the academic criticisms found in the source material. As the documentation clearly states, China-Africa agricultural cooperation often faces allegations of land grabbing and resource exploitation. Some scholars maintain that without sufficient structural changes to address the current trade imbalance, these large-scale investments might just extract significant resources without yielding genuinely beneficial long-term outcomes for African sovereignty. These are highly complex challenges that definitely require transparent navigation. Let's pivot to Section 4, Unleashing New Mutual Benefits and Fostering Economic Growth. Shifting toward the actionable benefits, the sheer financial magnitude of this partnership is kind of hard to overstate. By the end of 2022, Chinese direct investment stock in Africa hit a staggering $47 billion, with total trade recently peaking at an incredible $282.1 billion. We were seeing major strategic deployments of capital through vehicles like the China-Africa Development Fund. To give you an idea, CAD fund investments in a Tanzania sisal farm created stable long-term jobs for over 1,000 local workers. Meanwhile, in Malawi and Mozambique, they've implemented a company plus farmers contract model, providing smallholders with inputs for cotton cultivation and a guaranteed market to reliably boost their incomes. And this brilliantly illustrates where true mutual benefit is actually found: technology transfer. Remember, China's own agricultural revolution was heavily driven by science and technology. By sharing these innovations, like deploying high fertilizer efficiency super rice hybrids that can yield an astounding 13.5 tons per hectare, African smallholders are gaining the exact tools they need to finally shatter that 1 ton per hectare ceiling we discussed a minute ago. Moving right along to Section 5, Strategic Solutions for Value, let's map out a roadmap for agribusiness. So, how do African businesses and governments actually capitalize on this zero-tariff opportunity? The source materials outline a really essential two-phased business strategy designed to systematically penetrate the Chinese consumer market. Phase 1, spanning the first 6 months, is all about market analysis and positioning. This means identifying the right product categories, mapping out competitive pricing, and engaging potential Chinese buyers. Phase 2, which runs through the rest of that first year, focuses heavily on partnership development, evaluating and locking in local Chinese distributors who truly understand the domestic landscape. Because you can't just ship products blindly and hope for the best. You absolutely need an export-ready supply chain.
The crucial takeaway here is this: long-term success requires actively linking the agricultural and industrial sectors. African nations must build up local processing capabilities instead of just continuously exporting raw materials. The action items are pretty clear. Governments need to expand technical and vocational skills, or TVET. They must incentivize deep food processing. They should be utilizing digital literacy and platforms, like Ghana's AgroMart, for instance, to connect farmers directly with processors. Finally, harmonizing regional standards, much like the East Africa Community did for food staples, ensures that when a product is processed, it already meets the strict quality requirements for global export. For those of us tracking global supply chains, this is the exact pivot point where Africa can transition from a raw material source to a global manufacturing competitor.
Let's wrap things up with Section 6, a sustainable future outlook and cultivating shared prosperity. A really perfect example of cultivating this shared prosperity is the Agricultural Technology Demonstration Centers, or ATDCs, that China has helped construct across Africa. For true sovereignty and sustainable development, the ultimate goal must be for the recipient nations to eventually independently manage these facilities. The documentation actually highlights a fantastic success story here. The demonstration center in South Africa has successfully transitioned to being fully managed by the local government. That is exactly what teaching people to fish looks like in practice, fostering self-sustaining innovation rather than long-term dependency. Which leaves us with one final provocative question. With zero tariff swinging the door wide open and massive technology transfers providing the essential tools, will Africa become a global agricultural powerhouse? The seeds for tomorrow's prosperity are literally being planted today. If you found this update helpful, please hit the like button and share this video with fellow members. For more deep dives into the latest environmental regulations and industrial news, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. See you in the next one.